kills 2 simps after they abuse my minotaur. Hello everyone, this is my first time posting. Longtime reader of RPG horror stories, but this shall be my first post. Also, forgive me if the spelling and grammar is not the best, I'm dyslexic. So please go easy on me. Anyway, let's get into the very long story. I was just getting back into D&D after my last year at TAFE, Community College. As such, I started to look for a new game to sink my teeth into. And wouldn't you know it, but one of my classmates, let's call her Jess, had wanted to DM an ancient Greek-themed world, and had already got 3 other classmates, all females, to sign up. And was happy that a guy would be joining, seeing how she wanted a mix of genders in the group. So session 0 rolls around, and this is where I shall introduce the cast of characters for the sake of brevity. I shall call them by their character names. Alexia, half-elf cleric of Artemis. Zoe, human wizard. Helen, tiefling bard. And lastly, me, Rune the Minotaur. All of them seemed really nice at the time, and even before we started D&D. The DM took us to lunch so we could get to know one another. So the day of session 0, I was pumped. I had an idea floating in my head and was super pumped to see what the others had come up with. It was at this point I started to see a couple of red flags, mainly with Alexia, whose backstory was she was a high priestess of Artemis, who when she went hunting, slept around with the centaurs and fauns of the forest. If you know anything about Greek myths, you know that Artemis's whole deal is her priestesses stay virgins, and if they do lose them, even if it wasn't their choice, they would pretty much get smited. The DM told her this, but Alexia said, well yeah, but the goddess can't always watch everyone, and being this pure being always drove her mad, and she couldn't help but to explore. The DM kinda liked the idea, but stated that she would have to be careful how she acted around major cities and such. The other red flag came up with Helen, who basically wanted to play a succubus muse that fell in love with any hero she met, and after she was done playing with them, she wrote a new song about how bad they were. Think Taylor Swift, but with mind-breaking spells later on. Anyway, it went around the table, and all of them spoke about their characters, until it got to me. When I told them I was going to be playing a half minotaur, think of a satyr, human head, but bull horns and lower half bull, himbo barbarian, with a heart of gold and childlike wonder. The DM loved it, and Zoe thought it would be cool to see a monster fight alongside the heroes. But the ones who really loved it were Helen and Alexia, who started to ask me about what he looked like, and what kind of girls he went after. I kind of shrugged and told them that Rune doesn't really know anything about dating, seeing how he was locked up in the maze all his life. It was at that point Helen said something that made me a little worried about the sessions to follow. Oh, don't worry, Rune. We can teach him everything about a lady. All of us had a laugh thinking it was a joke, and we moved on. Oh, how wrong I was. Cut to the first session. Everything was going great. We had been sent by a follower of Hermes to go and kill a pack of hellhounds. Later found out they were just black wolves, and bring back their pelts. On the way back from the killing, we had to rest. This is where the first incident occurred. Seeing how minotaurs don't have dark vision, I told the party that I wouldn't be the best if I took a watch, so maybe the rest of you would. At this point, I did have a lot of the limelight, seeing how in the combat I had pretty much killed half of the pack. So I thought it would be a great roleplay point for them, so I took my long rest, and this is where the horror started. Alexia and Helen players started to chat to one another in whispers, before giggling and waiting for Rune to fall asleep, and then asked the DM if they could sneak over to Rune and sit down next to him. The DM gave them a raised brow and said sure, roll a stealth check. Both rolled over my passive perception, which was a 10. They then said we are going to take off Rune's pants and ask the DM how big he was. Cut to me, the DM, and Zoe looking at them in shock. The DM is not sure what to do, looked over at me, and asked me if I was okay with this. I said no, and both of them started to get very defensive, saying it is what their characters would do, and how they had never seen one of his kind. I wanted to see if the rumors were true. The DM then cut them off and said it didn't happen, and that if they tried to pull this crap again, they were out of the game. They both kinda sighed, and we kept going. After the game, the DM pulled me aside, said sorry for what happened, and said it wouldn't happen again, and if it did, she would boot them out. After the pants incident, everything was alright for a while. A couple of sessions passed, and we have dealt with some more monsters, / talked to some more NPCs. We even got to know about the plot about a new lich who had found a book of monsters and was using it to control said monsters. During this time, both Alexia and Helen would make passing remarks about Rune and try to flirt with him, but it would always fly over Rune's head, and we all got a small chuckle out of it. Well, Zoe, DM, and me. Then it all went downhill, when one night after the game, both Alexia and Helen's players asked me if Rune would ever date one of them. I told them no, it would never happen, seeing how Rune was like me, asexual. After they found this out, they flipped out, saying that D&D is a fantasy, and he should pick one of them, and how dumb I was for not wanting a romance plot. I later learned they also had a bet to see who would get with Rune first. After they left, I messaged my DM about it, and DM told me that she would fix it next session, and not to worry. The last session of this campaign was one of beauty. After we did the last quest, we went to the tavern to spend the night. Zoe's character, at this point, had to leave. He went off to class, so it was the three of us. Rune started to drink a lot, for he had killed a mighty foe, and wanted to drink until he dropped. Alexia and Helen's players couldn't be happier. The DM knew what they had planned after Rune had his fill and was drunk. They took him up to the room. At this point, I looked over at the DM, and she gave me the evilest smile I have ever seen. The DM asked what they do, and they start to tell her about how they touch and feel him up. It is at this point Alexia's character hears a voice in her head, a very, very pissed off goddess of the hunt, who basically tells her for her actions of sin, she and the devil behind her shall be punished. The DM then tells them how Rune's eyes glow with a holy light, and how his hand grabs his great axe and he roars a mighty roar. The next thing we could do was scream, as both Alexia and Helen's body hit the floor and were carved into by the Minotaur. The players then started a screaming match at the DM, after which both of them packed up their crap and left. The DM said she would start a new game soon, and she would keep me posted. After the game, the DM started a new one, with Rune and Zoe and 2 more newcomers. It was one of the best games I ever played. If you got to this point, I just wanted to say thank you for reading my first ever D&D horror story. Oh, if Crit Crab or Den of the Drake, your videos are what got me to write this, so yeah, thanks for all the hours and fun videos you do.